Have you ever sat quietly after a phone call with one of your children, feeling like something just isn't right? Maybe their words were polite, but there was a tension underneath. Or maybe the conversation ended in frustration, and now you're left wondering, what happened? Why does this feel so different than it used to? If this sounds familiar, you're not alone. Many people over 60 find themselves facing new challenges in their relationships with adult children. What once felt like a close, easy bond can become strained or confusing. Maybe you feel like you're walking on eggshells. Maybe you've been told you're interfering, even when all you wanted to do was help. Or maybe you've heard nothing at all for weeks, and the silence weighs heavier than any argument ever could. It can feel heartbreaking. But the truth is, as children grow into adulthood, their needs, expectations, and boundaries change. And while love stays constant, the way we express it and receive it sometimes needs to grow too. That's why today, I want to talk with you, heart to heart, about how to handle conflict with your adult children. Because no matter what stage of life you're in, it's never too late to rebuild harmony and restore connection. We're going to walk through 5 meaningful steps that can truly help shift things in your relationship. These aren't abstract ideas. They're practical, heartfelt changes you can make that have the power to bring you and your children back to a place of peace and mutual respect. And the first step, the foundation of all the others, is learning to listen without defending. Now, I know that's easier said than done. When your child comes to you upset, maybe about something you said or did, it's natural to want to explain yourself right away. You might think, but I didn't mean it like that, or I was only trying to help, and of course you were. Your intentions were good. But the tricky thing is, in these moments, jumping in with explanations can make the other person feel unheard, like their feelings are being brushed aside. So instead, try this. The next time a tough conversation starts, take a deep breath. Let your child talk, even if what they're saying feels unfair or upsetting. Just listen, not with the intent to reply or correct, but simply to understand. Imagine yourself stepping into their shoes. What might they be experiencing on their end? What fear or pressure or old wound might be hiding behind their frustration? You'd be amazed how powerful silence can be when it's filled with presence and patience. Often, when someone feels truly heard, their defensiveness melts. The walls come down. And from that place, real conversation, real healing can begin. Let me give you an example. A woman I once spoke with, let's call her Margaret, had been having trouble with her son. Every time she offered advice about his parenting, he snapped at her. She felt hurt, even insulted. But one day, instead of replying with hurt feelings, she simply asked, "Is there something I've done that makes you feel like I don't trust your parenting?" That simple question opened the door. Her son shared that he often felt judged, not because of what she said, but because of how often she said it. Margaret hadn't realized that her words, even when well-meaning, were landing as criticism. That moment of honest listening changed everything. Which brings us to something closely related: respecting boundaries, even when they feel uncomfortable. You see, once children become adults, they begin building their own lives, their own rules, their own rhythms. And while we as parents may still want to be involved, to guide, to protect, sometimes they need space. And that can sting, especially if you've spent a lifetime putting their needs before your own. But honoring their boundaries doesn't mean you love them less. It means you trust them to stand on their own feet. It means you're giving them the dignity of making their own choices, even if you would do things differently. Think of it like tending a garden. When they were small, you watered and sheltered them constantly. But now, they've grown deep roots. They need sunlight, even when it's harsh. They need a little wind to strengthen their stems. And your role shifts, from caretaker to wise observer, always there, always loving, but with a gentler hand. Sometimes, respecting boundaries means not calling every day, even if you want to hear their voice. Sometimes it means waiting to be asked before giving advice, even if you're bursting with answers. And sometimes it means allowing them to make mistakes, because those lessons are part of their own journey. But here's the beautiful thing. When you give that space with grace, your children often come closer, not further. They feel safe, not smothered. And that feeling opens doors that might have once been shut tight. Now, I understand this isn't easy. It takes humility, patience, and a lot of courage. But remember, these small shifts are not about giving up who you are or staying silent forever. They're about opening the path for new kinds of conversations. Ones rooted in mutual respect, not old patterns. Ones where both you and your child feel seen, heard, and valued. And once you begin to listen more deeply and honor their boundaries more gently, you start creating a space where trust can bloom again. That's when real healing begins, not from grand gestures, but from small, steady moments of understanding. Let's keep going, because there's more we can do to rebuild that bridge. So far, we've talked about listening without jumping to defend ourselves, and about giving our adult children the space they need, even when it's hard. These steps lay the foundation for healing. But now I want to shift our focus to something that might surprise you, letting go of the need to be right. Now, I know that can feel like a tough pill to swallow, especially when you know you're right about something. Maybe you've lived through situations your children are just now encountering for the first time. You've got decades of experience under your belt. You've made the mistakes, learned the lessons, and seen how things play out in the long run. It can feel frustrating to watch them ignore advice that could save them trouble. But here's something to consider. When it comes to relationships, being right isn't always what matters most. What often matters more is being connected. And the truth is, insisting on being right, especially during conflict, can create more distance than closeness. It can come across as controlling or dismissive, even when that's the farthest thing from your intention. Letting go of being right doesn't mean you have to pretend you're wrong. It simply means you're choosing peace over pride. You're saying, I value this relationship more than I value winning this argument. Think about it this way. If your adult daughter says, I felt like you didn't support me when I needed you, your first instinct might be to correct her. Of course I supported you. I was always there. But instead of jumping to your defense, what if you paused and said, that wasn't my intention, but I'm really sorry you felt that way. Can you help me understand what you needed from me then? That kind of response opens the door instead of closing it. It shows you're not trying to win, you're trying to understand. And that shift can turn a heated moment into a healing one. I once knew a man named James who had a rocky relationship with his eldest son. They clashed constantly, especially about money. James had worked hard his entire life and believed in saving every penny. His son, on the other hand, saw things differently. He wanted to enjoy life, take risks, invest. They argued for years, and it drove a wedge between them. But one day, James decided to stop trying to change his son's mind. Instead, he said, I still see things differently, but I respect that you're making choices you believe in. That's what I did at your age too. And just like that, the dynamic shifted. The arguments faded, and their conversations became more about connection than correction. Sometimes, what our children want most from us isn't advice. It's validation. They want to know that we see them, not just as our children, but as capable adults. And by letting go of the need to prove a point, we give them something even more valuable, the freedom to be themselves and the assurance that we love them no matter what. Of course, this doesn't mean you can't share your perspective. You absolutely can and should when the moment is right. But there's a difference between sharing and insisting. When you speak from a place of gentleness rather than judgment, your words are much more likely to be received. Now let's talk about something equally important, taking responsibility for our part, even when it feels small. I know that in many families, there are layers of history. Old hurts, misunderstandings, things that were said years ago and never quite forgotten. And sometimes, even if we don't believe we did anything wrong, there's still room to acknowledge how our actions may have affected the other person. Taking responsibility isn't about blame. It's about maturity. It's about saying, I may not have meant to hurt you, but I can see now how my words or actions might have done so. And I'm sorry for that. That one sentence can be a game changer. It doesn't make you weak, it makes you wise. It shows your child that you care more about healing than holding on to pride. And it can encourage them to look inward, too. You might be surprised how often this step unlocks conversations that have been stuck for years. I remember a woman, Grace, who had a long-standing rift with her daughter. They hadn't spoken in nearly 2 years. Grace finally wrote a letter, not to explain or justify, but simply to say, "I miss you. If I ever made you feel unloved, I am deeply sorry. That was never my intention." Her daughter didn't respond right away, but weeks later, she called. They cried, talked, and slowly began to rebuild. All because Grace had the courage to go first. Owning our mistakes doesn't diminish us, it humanizes us. It shows our children that even at 60, 70, or 80, we're still growing, still learning, still capable of change. And here's the truth. When we lead with humility, we invite humility in return. When we soften, it makes it easier for the other person to soften too. Walls begin to crumble, and hearts begin to open. Conflict with our adult children doesn't have to be the end of the story. It can be the beginning of a new chapter, one where the relationship evolves, deepens, and matures alongside both of you. But it takes intention, it takes courage, and most of all, it takes love, the kind that listens deeply, respects boundaries, surrenders the need to be right, and takes responsibility when needed. Now that we've laid the groundwork with listening, respecting boundaries, letting go of being right, and taking responsibility when needed, there's one final piece to this puzzle. It might sound simple, but don't let that fool you. This step is often the most powerful of all. It's about choosing to show love in ways that matter to them, not just in the way that comes naturally to you. You see, love is the thread that runs through everything we've been talking about. But as we get older, and as our children change, the way we express love sometimes needs to change, too. Not because our love is any less, but because the way it's received might not be the same as it used to be. Maybe you show your love by giving advice, sending gifts, or helping out with chores. But if your child feels overwhelmed or pressured by those gestures, it might not come across the way you intended. On the flip side, your child might value things like a supportive text, a compliment, or just a listening ear. And if that's not how you typically express yourself, there could be a disconnect. This is where being intentional makes a big difference. Start to pay attention to what lights them up, what makes them feel safe and appreciated. It might be as small as remembering to ask how their work presentation went, or as thoughtful as simply saying, "I'm proud of you." These small gestures can go a long way in healing relationships. They let your child know, "I see you. I care. I'm here for you." I once heard a story about a man named Leonard who had always been a provider. He worked hard, saved diligently, and made sure his kids never lacked anything. But as his children became adults, he felt the bond weaken. One day, his daughter told him, "Dad, I know you love me, but I don't always feel it." That stopped him in his tracks. He thought he'd been showing love all along, through sacrifice, through action, but what she craved was his words. She wanted to hear that he loved her, that he was proud of her, not just see it in what he did, but hear it from his heart. Leonard began making small changes. He started writing her little notes, leaving short voicemails, even sending the occasional text. And with time, their relationship softened, deepened. It wasn't about grand gestures. It was about love in the language she understood. We all have different emotional languages, and learning your child's can be one of the most generous things you do. It says, "I'm still learning how to love you better." And isn't that what all relationships need to grow? At this stage of life, you might think the heavy lifting is done. And in many ways, it is. You've built the foundation, you've raised your children, you've watched them step into adulthood. But relationships aren't built once. They're nurtured again and again, like a garden that needs tending through each season. Sometimes a little weeding, sometimes more light, and sometimes just a gentle touch. And when conflict arises, as it sometimes will, that's not a sign of failure. It's a sign of growth waiting to happen. It's an invitation to dig deeper, to open up, and to remember that you and your child are both still evolving. If you've had a falling out or a cold silence between you, don't believe the lie that it's too late. As long as there's breath in your lungs and theirs, there is always time for a new beginning. It may not look exactly the way you imagined. It may take longer than you hoped. But with humility, love, and a willingness to try again, relationships can heal. Walls can come down, and that old familiar closeness can find its way back, sometimes in a brand new form. I want to remind you of something important. Your worth as a parent is not defined by a single conflict or even a difficult season. You've given your children life, guidance, love, and support in more ways than they may even realize. And the fact that you're here, watching this, means your heart is still open. You're still invested. You're still showing up. That, in itself, is something to be proud of. So, take what we've talked about today and let it settle in your heart. Let it grow roots. And when the next opportunity comes to speak gently, to pause instead of react, to listen rather than correct, or to say, I love you in a new way, take it. These are the moments that rebuild harmony. Not all at once, but little by little, like sunlight breaking through a cloudy sky. And if this message spoke to you today, I'd love for you to share your thoughts in the comments. What has helped you reconnect with your adult children? Or what's been your biggest challenge? Let's build a space here where wisdom and experience can be shared, where no one feels alone in what they're going through. If this video was helpful, please give it a thumbs up and consider subscribing to the channel. We've got more conversations like this ahead, all aimed at helping you live more peacefully, more joyfully, and more connected at any age. And finally, I want to leave you with this. You are not too old to grow, and it is never too late to heal. The love you carry is still powerful. The kindness you show still matters. And the relationships you cherish can still be restored. Here's to living your best life, with wisdom, grace, and a heart open to love.